You have a podcast, right?
I do have a podcast. Positivity Unleashed podcast is my podcast, neuroscience, and help people learn different topics about neuroscience. With meditation and with focusing on a task, like these things they're like balancing each other out. Think about if you watch like a really motivational speech, that can naturally raise your dopamine. Like without taking anything, you can naturally raise your dopamine.
Hello, Clark. Thank you so much for attending our podcast today.
Thank you, Carrie. Happy to be here. We're in beautiful Central Park right now. We've got a waterfall behind us.
Okay, so please imagine there are many audience. So could you please introduce yourself, your name, and then what do you do in New York?
So my name is Clark Moore. I currently reside in New York City. I've been in the New York area for about a decade now, kind of in and out. I'm originally from California, the Silicon Valley, and did my college here at Long Island at Stony Brook University studying neuroscience. I did a master's in cognitive neuroscience at the Graduate Center at CUNY, and now I work in neuroscience. So that's what I do currently. And the way I kind of like to preface this is like my life goal, like my purpose, my why, so to speak, is to help people understand the human brain. So I do that in two ways, for two companies actually. I work two companies. One of them is for Brain Vision. They are a distributor of neurophysiological devices used for research. So my clients are universities that buy EEG devices to study the brain and understand how the brain works, understand how cognition works. So that's the one way that I do that. The second one is through a startup company, actually a very early startup company called Flourish. They're based in the Bay Area, and their whole MO is about well-being and mental health. So it's an AI-based app used to help you with your mental health and your well-being. It's kind of like a Duolingo for your happiness is the way we like to describe it. So
I love that. And then you have a podcast, right?
I do have a podcast.
Yes. Talk about it.
Yes, of course. So positive. So that's kind of like the third way that I fulfill this goal. So one is to Brain Vision is to help people learn new things about the brain. Flourish and my podcast are both kind of a similar goal, which is to help people with their mental health in a certain way. So Positivity Unleashed podcast is my podcast. We talk about all things like positive. We'll talk about health and neuroscience. We cover a lot of different topics, but yeah, the idea is to just get the message out there about neuroscience and help people learn different topics about neuroscience.
I see. Okay. Next question. So currently, what title, role do you have as a startup?
Well, at the startup? Yeah, at the startup, I'm customer relations specialist. So the idea why we created this role is because we didn't want it to be just sales, which is like managing inbound leads and outbound leads, but we wanted to be more like a customer relationship, right? And then on top of that, it would also turn into, at some point, more account management and just facilitating a relationship throughout the customer life cycle.
I see. So you said your startup clients are university researcher or medical people.
Yeah, for Brain Vision, yeah. So for Brain Vision, our clients are really universities. Sometimes medical though. Sometimes we sell to clinic. Our devices aren't for clinical use, so there's a difference between like research EEG and clinical EEG. So clinical EEG is like for electroencephalography, which is it's a device that you put it on your head. It's like a cap. So it's got all these, it's a cap. You put it on your head, it's a cap. And with these electrodes, what they're called, they measure your brain activity. They measure neural activity kind of indirectly. It was invented about 100 years ago by a guy named Hans Berger. You can look him up.
Okay.
And it actually just turned 100 years old last month. So
really? Anniversary.
So the technology has been around for some time now. So researchers have really used it to study the brain in a whole number of ways. Actually, a fun fact about EEG, the reason that Hans Berger invented it is because he was trying to use it for telepathy. so that
Telepathy?
telepathy, so that you and I
cool.
could speak to each other just by thinking. And
cool.
of course, it did not work in that way. But the thing that he invented has been crucial in how researchers and people have understood and studied the brain.
Amazing. Okay. And then, so end users are like normal people who have some problem or issue.
There's a lot of different use cases. So I would say we'll go through three.
Yes,
We'll go through
please.
three. One is you were mentioning the consumer. So you and I could purchase EEGs for ourselves to measure our brain waves. Actually, we were talking about a really cool Japanese company. I'm forgetting the name right now.
Yes.
But what we were talking about is one of my favorite uses of EEG is one thing that it's good at is measuring if you're like awake and conscious, or if you get alpha waves, which is like a different electrical activity that the EEG picks up, which measures basically you're starting to fade, maybe you're a little tired. So if you have someone just close their eyes with these on, it'll start to get these alpha waves. So this Japanese company, what they did is they created these bunny ears. Yeah, the bunny ears. And so you put this headband on and you go to like a concert or something. I think it's the thing that I saw. And basically if you start getting alpha waves, you start getting tired, the like perky bunny ears start to droop a little bit. Oh, it's so cute. It's the best. So there is consumer grade EEG. What we do at Brain Vision is we sell to universities. So now these are people trying to understand like how attention works or how visual processing works in the brain. The third one is the clinical use. Now this is also what you were mentioning, which is like people that have certain neurological disorders that EEG is able to pick up. So one of the like most prominent would be epilepsy, so seizures. When someone gets a seizure, the neural activity starts to become hyper synchronized. So your neurons in your brain are like flashing on and off like a strobe light. So this is actually why patients with epilepsy aren't able to look at strobe lights, because it's basically firing neurons in your occipital lobe in this really synchronous way, which could cause the rest of the brain to start firing in that synchronous way, which is actually really bad. That's what causes a seizure.
I see. Interesting. So, of course, we want, so for instance, so our brain is like not a machine, so we have to have rest. And then, thanks to like sleep or rest, we can like use like full power, right? And then eating food also.
Yeah.
So we have to care of our brain.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so last 2 weeks or almost 3 weeks, I was in San Francisco, and then I did volunteer for a startup conference. The concept was productivity tool. So there are many CEOs who have a product to help people's productivity, and then they really care about like into zone or like Pomodoro technique like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I wonder, so getting information over our brain, but we really want to manage how can we get zone situation, because thanks to zone, already 1 hour?
Yeah, right.
And then I did good job like that. So what do you think?
Yeah, so really the point you're hitting on here is so important. I was thinking about it before I came here, which is homeostasis, which is this idea of balance in the body. Homeostasis. And the idea is balance, not only in the brain, but also the body. So what I think these Silicon Valley tech bros are getting at here is productivity, but in the form of optimization. I think that's a really popular topic right now, which is like the Pomodoro technique, like you mentioned, is a really good one, because the idea is like, if I do this all the time. What I do is I'll do the wrong thing, which is I'll start work at 9 a.m. and then I'll work straight for 8 hours until 5 p.m. and I'll drink coffee, and by the end I'm burnt out. I can't think anymore. My productivity goes down. I'm tired. Like you said, the thing is like our brain is this supercomputer of supercomputers, but we need sleep.
Yes.
We need food to feed the brain. We need healthy food to feed the brain in order for this machine, like you said, to work efficiently.
Yeah.
So it's a really good point. Pomodoro is a great technique. If you don't know it, the idea is you set a timer for 25 minutes.
25 minutes.
Yeah, 25 minutes. Set your timers right now, 25 minutes. And you work. You work on a task. You're like, I'm going to do this task.
Yes.
At the end of the 25 minutes, you take a break. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes, and you just keep going through these cycles. And the idea is, you know, our brains get into this focus mode, which is taxing. It takes energy, right?
Yes.
So you need to dial it back, relax, go out into nature, take a walk, and help your brain rest so that when you come back for that next 25-minute cycle, you're more focused. And then by the end of the day, you're not as burnt out.
I see. Okay.
Great point. Great
Amazing.
point. I do have past companies I've worked for that are startups at different stages, like startups at a really, really early stage versus startups at a much later stage. And it's so interesting to see the difference is in how they operate. I find that companies in that really, really early stage, they have problems like building a product,
Yes.
finding product market fit.
Yeah.
And that's where like outbound sales, which is my previous roles, comes into play, which is that you need to get the word out. Nobody knows about your company. Your job is to go message people that might have a really good use case for your solution and speaking with them. So I do a little bit of that. But now I think really like my favorite part of my job is the pre-sales part. Pre-sales. So this is the idea of like before a customer buys anything,
Yes.
they need to figure out, we need to figure out together. It's very collaborative of like, what are your needs? Like my favorite part is I love listening to customers and figuring out like listening closely, actively listening, what are their needs? And then I try to help figure out what solutions do we provide that can satisfy these needs and help these people. That's my favorite part. I could do that all day.
Amazing.
do that all day.
Okay, so after you graduate current role, what do you want to do? What do you think? Next step?
It's the $1 million question. I really don't have a great answer right now. I think right before this podcast, we were talking about she asked me if I ever wanted to start a company. And I was saying that's a great question for me, and I'll explain why in a sec. But to answer your question, in the next like 5 years or 10 years, what do I want to do next? Right now, I'm very happy in my role. I'm very happy because I get to do that kind of pre-sales, solutions engineering part. I think if I ever did something else, I'd do something similar because, like I said, that's the part of the job I love most, which is just listening to customers and figuring out what they need. That being said, I'd love right now to answer the startup question. So growing up, I grew up in the Silicon Valley, just surrounded by startup companies, VCs. Back then, I was very inspired by my friends' parents who are and were VCs, venture capitalists. And I started reading books. The first book I read was by a guy named Bill Draper. If you don't know who that is, he's a very famous venture capitalist who's kind of like foundational in the Silicon Valley. And that was a book that inspired me a lot. And at the time, I really wanted to I loved biology. I've always loved biology. So I wanted to be in like the biomedical field, like investing in startup companies in the biomedical field. So is that dream lost? Who knows? At some point along the way, I really fell in love with neuroscience and continued to pursue neuroscience rather than focusing with kind of on the startup investor side of things. But nowadays, I mean, I could potentially maybe look to that one day. So that's on my mind. However, the question was, would I ever start a company? And the answer is potentially, maybe. You know, I think if the right thing came about, I would go for it. What I was telling her though is that at every step along the way in my career, there was one more thing that I learned that I was like, wow, if I started a company without knowing this, then it probably wouldn't have been very successful. And of course, when you start a company, you live and you learn these mistakes and you learn about this, that, and the other thing. And it's all well and good, but I find that as I've built out my own experience, I feel like every single time I'm like, the startup company I would build now, I would do it completely differently than had I started 10 years ago. So again, coming back to the question, there was one idea for a startup company that I had that has been on my mind for a while now. And it comes from actually not neuroscience, but from my love of running. I've been a cross-country runner my whole life.
Like a kind of a trail runner? What is it?
Yeah, exactly. Trail running.
What?
So long distances, 3+ miles, up to 10
Wow.
miles plus. I've never done a marathon. I might do one day, but my favorite thing is to run in Central Park. I love it because I can get out into nature. That's the one thing.
Yes.
And the second thing is listen to my favorite music.
I do.
You do.
Yes.
Central Park?
So previously I was living in 42nd Street and 11th Avenue, so close to Hudson River.
Oh, the best.
I love
the best.
running
I love the
Hudson
piers.
River side.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the piers are amazing.
Yeah, but Central Park also amazing.
Yeah. So I had this idea for a startup company while I was running on the East River, actually, and I was listening to music.
Okay.
And do you listen to music when you run at all?
Great question. Recently shifting to listen some podcasts to get information, but I don't think I can understand well because sometimes my attention is going somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Even Japanese. Did I listen? I forgot like that.
So for me, when I run, I don't listen to podcasts much, but that's a good idea. I might try starting with that. But I listen to a lot of music. I'll be on Spotify or Apple Music on shuffle mode.
Okay.
Right? So you have like random songs coming in, and every once in a while I'm like, whoa, this song is really cool. I wish I knew what song this was. But of course I'm on shuffle. I mean, you can go back into your Spotify history, so that's one way to do it, I guess. But the idea that I had, I called it Rhythm Runner. So
Rhythm Runner.
So the idea is this. When you run, I use Strava to like track my runs. It's a very popular way to like map it out. Yeah, Strava. So it creates like a map of your run. Same with like Garmin and these companies. The idea was like to mix the Strava API with the Spotify API.
Okay.
Marry them together so that
Wow.
when you go for the run, it'll map your run based on the music you're listening to.
What?
So so that's the idea. So go ahead, you're welcome to steal it because I just want to use this thing, right? Like I would love to use this product. If anyone from Strava or Spotify is listening to this, steal my idea, please take it because I would love to see this happen. So basically as you run, when you get your map at the end of the run, it'll be like, oh, for the first half mile, you were listening to, I don't know, Taylor Swift or something like that, a Taylor Swift song. And then the next, half mile, you're listening to a different song. And then it'll create a playlist out of the run that you did. So you can have your phone on shuffle, you can listen to whatever playlist, and then you have this map of the music you listen to. So that's the idea.
So okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Right? So if we create this function, so for example, we can run like around this, what can I say, a pond? Not a pond.
Yeah, I call that a pond.
Right? And then maybe I'm not faster, so maybe 20 minutes. And then so every day if I do run same route, and then Spotify create same playlist. So for example, when I run this front of the waterfall, like this Taylor Swift song, and then like what can I say, kind of making the strong memory, place, music, and some atmosphere in my brain.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a good point. So I mean, if you wanted to curate, a playlist based on your run like that, it would map it and save the playlist. So that was the other part of the app that I had an idea for, is like sharing your run. So it's like, okay, so you go for your run and you're always listening to Taylor Swift at this point at the waterfall next to the pond, and you're like, hey, I've made this like perfect playlist for this running route. You could share the route and the playlist with another person.
Cool.
That's the other part, is the social side of it, and a network effect.
Yeah, this is good. People want to ask, hey Clark, why are you listening Taylor Swift front of this beautiful waterfall? Why?
That's true. I'll go to Silicon Valley for the investors. I'll come to New York for the engineers.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay, next question.
Yeah.
So last Sunday, we really talk about meditation, and then you really love meditation,
I love
right?
meditation.
When did you start your meditation habit?
You know what? Actually, when I was very little, my mom would guide me through a meditation to go to sleep.
I see.
So that's where it all started. She did, she would guide me through the classic body scan meditation. For those of you who don't know what it is, basically you start with your feet. You start just relaxing your feet, and you put your attention to your feet and really focus on relaxing just your feet. And then you move to your ankles, then you move to your legs, your body, and you just keep going up the body. And this has a couple functions. I mean, one, you're just really relaxed and breathing, just, typical meditation. It also just puts your focus on something that's very calm and neutral and connects it back to your body. There's something in neuroscience we talk about, which is called interoception. Interoception is this idea that you have a sensation for your internal body, really. So your inside state. So exteroception is like, I'm looking at the ponds, I'm talking to Kaori, right? It's all the external stuff is exteroception. Interoception is like basically meditation, where you kind of you go within. So,
I see.
Yeah. The idea here, like I was saying, is like when we focus. Actually, I'll talk about the neuroscience of this a little bit.
Please.
So when we actually, this comes back to fMRI. So fMRI is this other neuroscience technique. It's this giant magnet. Maybe some of you.
FM?
Yeah, fMRI. That's just letters. fMRI.
Okay.
And it's this giant magnet that takes a scan of your brain. And so it's another way of looking at neural activity, and it's a way to look at it spatially. So you can actually see like this part of your brain is on and this part of your brain is on.
Yes.
So what they found was two different states that people were in, and there's names for this. There's the task positive network and the default mode network. So task positive network is when you're in the scanner, you're doing a task. So maybe it's a homework assignment, or they're asking you to push this button or push that button. So imagine, when you're at work, you're doing tasks all day. And what they found is that certain brain regions light up when you're doing a task.
Yes.
The opposite of that is the default mode network. When you're doing nothing, when you're just at rest and you are meditating, uses almost the opposite brain regions. So the ones that were off for the task positive ones turn on, and vice versa. So I think that with meditation and with focusing on a task, like these things they're like balancing each other out. So when we do a lot of work like the Pomodoro technique, we need to balance that out. Now, Pomodoro technique is on a small time scale, right? 25 minutes and 5 minutes.
Yes.
I think what you're asking about is over a day or over a week even, where it's like, okay, I have been doing so many tasks every single day, day to day. How do I balance that out?
Yeah.
Having a meditation practice at the end of your day, at the beginning of your day, is one way to get back into that default mode network and try to interocept, focus on your body, really relax, and you're now using different parts of your brain and you're letting the other parts of your brain rest. So that's where we can find that balance in a meditation practice.
I see. And then so you do this skill, and then you are available to keep like flat.
Yeah.
You don't go to.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah. It keeps you from really burning out. And burning out can really manifest in a lot of different ways. I mean, like fatigue, maybe even depression if it's really bad.
Yeah.
One thing that actually, I have a joke on my podcast.
Yes, please.
The running joke is that I talk about the running joke on my podcast is that I talk about this neurochemical called dopamine on every single episode. It's like an episode. I can't go the whole episode without talking about dopamine. So it's only fitting that I talk about it on this episode.
I see.
So dopamine is this chemical in our brain that gets released for kind of two things. It gets released for a reward. So like when we eat chocolate.
Yes.
When we eat chocolate, when we are successful at getting a task done, we get this release of dopamine.
Yes.
But we also need this baseline level of dopamine to motivate us to go get the chocolate, to go do the task, to go for a run. So it's directly linked to our motivation, but also craving. It's also associated with addiction, because addiction is when we start to get this imbalance in our craving, where it's like we crave this one I'm addicted to chocolate, for example. Like I'm going to do everything I can to get chocolate. All I think about is chocolate. It's like your dopamine system gets hijacked in a way where all we want to do is go eat chocolate.
Yeah.
So dopamine is very important for motivation. So if our baseline dopamine is really low, this is actually what turns into depression, really. Like people talk about serotonin a lot for depression, and that is true to a degree, because serotonin is really associated with being satisfied. Like, hey, I am enough. I'm content with what I have, and that's an important piece of depression. But I would say another more important part that people don't talk about enough is dopamine, which is when we have overtaxed our dopamine. You know, say we've watched TikTok for 8 hours, and then we ran 10 miles, and then we did 10 VC pitches, you know, right in a row.
Yes.
Our baseline dopamine just shoots down. And when that happens, we feel lethargic. We feel like we don't have the juice. We don't have the energy to go do things that we need to do.
I see.
So regulating our dopamine and getting balance in our dopamine is one way to stay motivated, to stay productive, to keep that edge. And there's a couple ways to get that baseline dopamine back. I would say meditation is a great one, because when we are going to do all these things that raise dopamine, so like eating chocolate, even running, even getting our work done, we're like taxing this dopamine system, or TikTok or Instagram, taxing our dopamine system. It's that baseline level goes down and we just get, you know, just not as energetic. So we need to do things to raise that back up. So one, of course, is meditation, where we're not doing all those other things. We're just at rest, we're relaxed, our dopamine goes up. Going to sleep helps. Getting enough sleep is an important part of it. Doing this really intense 8-hour workday, you've done 7 hours, you're at the very end of the day.
Yes.
You can actually do things to raise your dopamine in the moment. One of which would be like making a joke, or honestly even eating a piece of chocolate, like something to get, or coffee. I mean, coffee is a classic one, right? Like we'll drink a coffee to go get the dopamine back up so that we can keep going. So think about, like, you know, if you watch like a really motivational speech, that can naturally raise your dopamine. Like without taking anything, you can naturally raise your dopamine and get motivated to get that last hour of the workday.
I see.
Yeah.
Actually, I used to be a chocolate junkie entire my life, at least before pandemic. But thanks to pandemic, thanks to this VR, but we couldn't go shopping. Instead of getting sugar, I bought a blueberries.
Okay.
So frozen blueberries, healthy snack, right? And then now, of course, I like sugar, but less addiction.
Yeah.
Yay!
Let's go.
Yes.
Less addiction. More blueberries.
Yes.
You heard it here first.
Yes. So Clark, I believe there are many your fan already.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Clark Moore. That's ClarkMoore. I don't know if you'll have this posted in a bio or something, but we can link up like my LinkedIn. I have 2 Instagram accounts. One of is for my music. So if you want to follow my music, that's Smooth Pursuit Music. The other one is for the podcast, of course, Positivity Unleashed Podcast. I would say please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you all. And if you have any questions about neuroscience or anything we talked about today, I would love to answer them. So feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you so much, Clark.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, talk soon. Bye-bye.